When you hear the word money, what comes to mind? For some, it's the paycheck that barely stretches far enough. For others, it's the dream of freedom, being able to make choices without fear of what's left in the bank account. Money is not just paper or numbers on a screen. It's trust. It's energy. It's the invisible thread that binds strangers together, allowing us to trade, build, and share our lives. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For most of history, money has been controlled by a few. Governments and banks hold the levers. They decide when to print more, who gets access, and who gets left behind. And while that system has given us stability, it has also made many feel powerless. Then Bitcoin appeared. A radical idea, money without middlemen. For the first time, ordinary people could hold and transfer value across the world, peer-to-peer with no gatekeepers. It was revolutionary. But as powerful as it was, Bitcoin also had limits, especially when it came to speed and day-to-day use. And that's where Litecoin enters the story. Litecoin wasn't trying to replace Bitcoin. It wasn't trying to become the loudest, flashiest coin on the market. Instead, it asked a simple question. What if money could move faster, cheaper, and more accessible, while keeping the same spirit of freedom that Bitcoin introduced? Think about it. Every day, people send money back home to their families. Migrant workers wire their earnings across borders, paying painful fees. Students abroad rely on their parents' support but lose chunks of it to hidden charges. Small businesses want to sell online, but they're strangled by processing costs. Litecoin matters because it touches these very human struggles. It's not about speculation or charts. It's about whether sending value can feel as easy as sending a text. And the name says it all, Litecoin. Light, nimble, accessible, created by Charlie Lee. A former Google engineer, Litecoin set out to be the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Not to compete, but to complement. Where Bitcoin was slow and heavy, Litecoin would be quick and practical. Where Bitcoin was about holding for the long haul, Litecoin would be about spending, moving, and living. And yet the story of Litecoin isn't just about technology. It's about a deeper human longing. We crave systems that give us dignity and choice. We want money that works for us, not against us. And even if you've never touched cryptocurrency, this story matters, because it speaks to the future of how we exchange value in a digital world. Every great story begins with a question. For Litecoin, that question came from one man, Charlie Lee. He wasn't a celebrity entrepreneur or a billionaire. He was simply a software engineer working at Google, fascinated by the idea of Bitcoin, but also aware of its limits. Bitcoin was groundbreaking, but it wasn't built for speed. Transactions could take minutes to confirm, sometimes longer. That was fine for holding wealth, but what about everyday payments? What about buying a coffee, splitting a bill, or sending money across the world instantly? Lee saw the brilliance of Bitcoin's foundation, but he also saw room for improvement. So he set out to build something lighter. Not to replace Bitcoin, but to stand beside it. He even described Litecoin as the silver to Bitcoin's gold. It was a metaphor people could grasp easily. Gold is valuable, durable, and rare, but heavy and inconvenient for daily transactions. Silver, on the other hand, is accessible, practical, and used more frequently in everyday life. That was Lee's vision for Litecoin, a currency that felt natural for daily use. And from the very beginning, Litecoin carried a spirit of openness. Charlie Lee didn't hide in the shadows. He didn't use a mysterious pseudonym like Satoshi Nakamoto. He stood behind his project, transparent and approachable. That in itself set Litecoin apart. It wasn't shrouded in mystery, it was built with the intention of being practical, transparent, and usable. But the vision went deeper than speed and simplicity. Litecoin was also about fairness. When it launched, it wasn't pre-mined or handed to insiders. Anyone could mine it, anyone could use it. In a space often criticized for hidden deals and unfair launches, Litecoin tried to embody the democratic ethos of crypto. Access for all. It's worth pausing here. Think about what that meant. The world was still recovering from the financial crisis. Trust in banks and governments was fragile. People were questioning whether the systems they relied on were truly designed to serve them. Against that backdrop, Bitcoin appeared as a rebellion, and Litecoin, just 2 years later, appeared as an extension of that rebellion, a belief that money should be faster, fairer, and more inclusive. This is what makes Litecoin's origin powerful. It wasn't about hype or celebrity endorsements. It wasn't about billion-dollar investments. It was a simple idea rooted in a human need: make money work better for people in their daily lives. And yet the origins also set up an important tension. Could Litecoin really live up to that vision? Could a lighter version of Bitcoin carve out its own identity? Or would it always live in Bitcoin's shadow? That's the question that takes us forward. Because vision is only the first step. To matter, a project needs technology that brings that vision to life. And that's where Litecoin's story gets even more interesting. When Charlie Lee launched Litecoin, he wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. He took Bitcoin's open source code, the foundation that made decentralized money possible, and tweaked it to solve some practical problems. In many ways, Litecoin is like a younger sibling. It shares the same DNA but moves with more agility. The first big difference was speed. Bitcoin transactions take about 10 minutes to confirm a block. Litecoin cuts that down to 5 minutes. That means the network processes transactions 4 times faster. Imagine standing in line at a coffee shop. With Bitcoin, you'd be waiting awkwardly, watching the barista tap their fingers while your transaction crawls through. With Litecoin, the confirmation comes much quicker, making it feel closer to how we're used to paying with cards or mobile apps. The second difference was accessibility. Litecoin uses a different mining algorithm called Scrypt. Without going deep into technical jargon, here's the simple idea. Bitcoin mining was already starting to favor those with specialized, expensive equipment. Litecoin's design allowed more ordinary computers to join in the mining process, at least in its early days. It was a statement of inclusivity. Anyone with a decent computer could take part. Over time, of course, mining has become more competitive for every coin, but the spirit of that design choice was about keeping things open. And then there's supply. Bitcoin caps out at 21 million coins. Litecoin raises that number to 84 million. The logic wasn't to make Litecoin cheaper, but to give people a sense of abundance. More coins to go around, more ease in using it for everyday transactions. On top of that, Litecoin has often been a testing ground for innovations. For example, technologies like segregated witness, SegWit, and the Lightning Network were adopted on Litecoin before Bitcoin. It became a kind of laboratory where new upgrades could be tried in a real environment. That role gave Litecoin a unique position, not just a payment coin, but a proving ground for the future of crypto. Think of it like this. Bitcoin is the massive cargo ship, steady and powerful, carrying immense weight across the ocean. Litecoin is the smaller, faster vessel zipping between ports, testing out new routes, experimenting with new sails. Both have their roles, but Litecoin's design made it nimble enough to try things that Bitcoin, with its scale and slower-moving consensus, couldn't adopt as quickly. But here's the part that really matters. Litecoin's technology wasn't about being flashy. It was about being practical. It was designed to answer a basic question. How can digital money actually feel usable in daily life? By being faster, more accessible, and open to experimentation, Litecoin's design tried to bridge the gap between vision and reality. Of course, technology is only as meaningful as the people who use it. And that leads to the next chapter in Litecoin's story. Adoption. Where has Litecoin actually been used? Who has embraced it? And does its design truly make it a currency for everyday life? A good idea doesn't mean much if it stays locked in theory. The real test of any currency is simple. Do people actually use it? For Litecoin, that question has shaped its entire journey. From the early days, Litecoin gained attention as one of the most practical cryptocurrencies. Exchanges adopted it quickly because it was reliable and fast. For traders, it became a favorite bridge coin, a way to move funds between platforms more efficiently than using Bitcoin. That might sound small, but it was important. It meant Litecoin wasn't just sitting on the sidelines, it was part of the actual plumbing of the crypto world. Then came real-world spending. Over the years, thousands of merchants began accepting Litecoin, from small online shops to larger payment processors. It found its way into industries as diverse as e-commerce, travel booking, and even charities. BitPay, one of the largest crypto payment services, added support for Litecoin, making it easier for businesses to integrate. Here's the thing, adoption wasn't about headlines or hype, it was about practicality. If you wanted to send money abroad, Litecoin was often faster and cheaper. If you wanted to pay for something online without waiting, Litecoin felt smoother. For many users, it wasn't about ideology, it was about convenience. And let's not forget remittances. Every year, billions of dollars flow from migrant workers back to their families. Traditional remittance services charge painful fees, especially for smaller amounts. Litecoin became a quiet but powerful alternative. Imagine a worker in Europe sending part of their paycheck back to their family in Africa or Asia. Instead of losing 10% to fees, the money arrives in minutes with minimal cost. For that family, the difference isn't abstract. It's food on the table, school fees paid, medicine bought. That's adoption in its most human form. Litecoin also carved a role in the gaming and digital goods space. Online communities where speed and low fees matter, embraced it for tipping and microtransactions. For many early adopters, it wasn't about speculation. It was about experimenting with money that actually worked online. But adoption is never just about numbers. It's about trust. Litecoin earned a reputation as one of the most stable and dependable cryptocurrencies. While other projects made wild promises and disappeared, Litecoin kept moving. Year after year, it stayed active, updated, and available. That consistency built a kind of quiet credibility. And yet, even as Litecoin built this base of adoption, questions lingered. Could it move beyond being a bridge coin or a backup payment method? Could it capture the imagination of a broader public? Or was it destined to be overshadowed by louder, newer projects? Because adoption is a double-edged sword. On one hand, Litecoin proved it could work. On the other, it had to fight for relevance in a space constantly chasing the next big thing. And that tension leads us into the next part of the story, the challenges. Because every currency, digital or traditional, faces obstacles. And Litecoin has had its share. Every project with ambition faces friction. And for Litecoin, the challenges have been as defining as the victories. One of the biggest criticisms is its identity. From the very start, Litecoin was branded as the silver to Bitcoin's gold. It was a helpful metaphor, but also a limiting one. If Bitcoin is the king, does that mean Litecoin is forever the sidekick? Some argue that Litecoin has always struggled to escape Bitcoin's shadow, never quite seen as its own movement, but rather as a derivative. Then there's the issue of visibility. In the crypto world, attention is currency. Projects like Ethereum captured imagination with smart contracts. Others launched with bold visions of decentralized finance, NFTs, or Web3. Litecoin, by contrast, stayed focused on payments. Practical? Yes, but not flashy. And in a space fueled by headlines and hype cycles, being the steady one sometimes felt like being invisible. There were also moments that hurt trust. In 2017, at the height of crypto's bull run, Charlie Lee announced he had sold or donated almost all of his Litecoin holdings. His reason? To avoid conflicts of interest. He didn't want people accusing him of pumping his own coin. From a transparency standpoint, it was noble. But for many in the community, it felt like abandonment. If the creator didn't want to hold it, why should they? That decision cast a long shadow, and Litecoin's reputation never fully shook off the controversy. On the technical side, Litecoin has also faced questions. While faster than Bitcoin, it wasn't unique for long. Other projects came along promising even quicker transactions, zero fees, or entirely new approaches to scaling. In a race where innovation never sleeps, Litecoin sometimes looked less like a pioneer and more like a veteran, respected but not leading the charge. Adoption, too, has its limits. While Litecoin is accepted in many places, it never achieved the cultural penetration of Bitcoin or the utility of Ethereum. Critics argue that spendable crypto is a shrinking niche because most people treat digital coins as investments, not currencies. In that context, Litecoin's mission can feel out of step with how people actually use crypto today. And then there's the market perception. Litecoin has often been mocked as boring. No wild promises, no groundbreaking new tech. Just stability. But here's the paradox. What some see as boring, others see as dependable. It's the difference between a flashy startup and a steady utility company. Which one you value more depends on what you're looking for. Still, the challenges are real. Litecoin has had to fight to prove it's not obsolete, to show that a focus on payments and reliability still matters in a space obsessed with novelty. And yet, in a strange way, these struggles reveal Litecoin's deeper strength. Because through all the ups and downs, through the criticism and fading spotlight, it has endured. The chain keeps running. Transactions keep confirming. Merchants keep accepting. Litecoin hasn't disappeared, it's adapted. Which brings us to the final question. After more than a decade in the crypto world, what's next? What future does Litecoin hold in a space that's evolving faster than ever? Talking about the future of any cryptocurrency is tricky. The space changes fast, trends come and go, and projects rise and fall almost overnight. And yet, Litecoin's future is shaped not just by speculation, but by its history of endurance. After more than a decade, it's still here, and that fact alone carries weight. One reason is that Litecoin has carved out a role as a testing ground for innovation. When SegWit and the Lightning Network were introduced, Litecoin implemented them early. More recently, features like MimbleWimble extension blocks, a technology that enhances privacy and scalability, were added to Litecoin before many bigger-name projects even considered them. This willingness to experiment without abandoning its core identity keeps Litecoin relevant as a sort of proving ground. Another factor is regulation. As governments around the world wrestle with crypto laws, projects with a long, transparent history stand to benefit. Litecoin has never been plagued by major scandals, rug pulls, or regulatory red flags. That reputation as clean and dependable could give it staying power in a future where only the most trustworthy projects survive. But perhaps the most important part of Litecoin's future is its simplicity. In a world of complex tokens, experimental financial products, and metaverse buzzwords, Litecoin remains focused on being what it set out to be, a fast, reliable form of digital money. That clarity might feel boring compared to flashier projects, but it also makes Litecoin easy to understand. And sometimes the simplest tools are the ones people actually use. Consider the broader context. Billions of people still lack access to fair and affordable financial services. Traditional banking is slow, expensive, and exclusionary for many. If cryptocurrencies are to deliver on their promise of financial freedom, the world will need tools that are easy, accessible, and proven. Litecoin checks those boxes. That said, the future won't be without pressure. Competing projects continue to promise faster speeds, zero fees, and wider ecosystems. Public interest could drift further toward smart contracts, AI-integrated platforms, or tokenized assets. If adoption keeps centering on speculation rather than spending, Litecoin's core mission, payments, could feel less urgent. And yet, history suggests that simplicity has a way of surviving. Just as email endured through waves of flashy apps, Litecoin may continue to thrive quietly in the background, doing the one job it set out to do, moving money fast and cheap. Perhaps that's Litecoin's future, not to dominate headlines, but to serve as a dependable backbone, a digital silver that complements the gold of Bitcoin and the experimentation of newer platforms. A project that might not be glamorous, but is always there when you need it. And that leaves us with the final reflection. In a space defined by noise and hype, maybe Litecoin's future isn't about being the loudest. Maybe it's about being the most reliable. If we step back and look at Litecoin's journey, what we see is not the story of a flashy revolution, but of quiet persistence. In a world where so many crypto projects have come and gone, hyped one year, forgotten the next, Litecoin has stayed. Block after block, transaction after transaction, it has kept running. And that consistency says something. At its core, Litecoin is not trying to be everything. It's not trying to reinvent the internet, tokenize every asset, or build a virtual world. It's trying to do one thing well, move money quickly, fairly, and reliably. And maybe that's why it's still here. Because underneath all the complexity of finance, that's what people need. The ability to send value easily across borders without being squeezed by fees or slowed down by middlemen. Think back to the intro. We talked about money not just as numbers, but as trust and energy. When a migrant worker sends wages home, when a small business gets paid for their craft, when a parent supports a child abroad, those aren't abstract transactions. They are acts of love, responsibility, and hope. And Litecoin, in its own modest way, has been part of making those moments smoother. That's not just technology, that's human impact. But Litecoin also teaches us something about endurance. It has faced its critics. It has been called boring, outdated, unnecessary. It has watched newer projects steal the spotlight. And yet here it is, more than a decade later, still active, still useful, still trusted. In an ecosystem obsessed with the new, Litecoin's survival is almost radical. There's also something quietly powerful about Litecoin's humility. It never pretended to be gold. It embraced being silver. Something lighter, more practical, more everyday. And in that humility lies wisdom. Not every tool needs to change the world overnight. Some tools simply need to work, reliably for the people who need them most. So what do we take away from Litecoin's story? First, that progress doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums in the background, steady and dependable. Second, that fairness and accessibility matter. Litecoin's launch was open, its design aimed at inclusivity, its purpose rooted in practicality. And third, that the future of money may not belong to the flashiest or the loudest, but to those systems people can actually trust, day after day, year after year. Litecoin may never be the coin that dominates headlines. It may never spark the fever of speculation like newer tokens do, but maybe that's the point. Its legacy might not be in changing everything, but in quietly proving that money can be freer, faster, and fairer. And that leaves us with a reflection for our own lives. How often do we overlook the steady, the humble, the dependable, because we're chasing the shiny and the new? Litecoin reminds us that sometimes the things that last aren't the things that dazzle us, but the ones that show up consistently doing their job without fail. So whether or not you ever hold Litecoin in your wallet, its story matters, because it's a mirror for how we think about money, trust, and endurance. It shows us that beyond the noise, what really matters is whether something works for the people who need it most. And in that way, Litecoin is more than silver. It's a quiet promise that money can move faster, feel fairer, and serve us all just a little better.